Hey YouTube, it's your boy. Don't forget to like and subscribe at the bottom. Nah, just kidding, you guys. Anyways, I'm going to show you a couple of last tricks with Vray to get you ready to output some of these and cut them out for your final rendering. So I've got this to a place where I'd like it, but I'd like to toggle some of these settings to show you what they do. Granted, this is Vray 2, so you'll have to find the specific options in Vray 3, but it's more streamlined, so you should be able to do a pretty good job finding them. So what I've got running here is a rendering that has all of my reflections and refractions turned off. It has my background turned off, but it has an environment turned on, and then a relatively low intensity light to create a pretty white top, relatively middle, and then darker shades on the side. So I'm going to show you what I have here. I'll actually walk you through what these settings are now because I think these are pretty optimal for what we're doing. So first off, I have override materials on and the color being white, and I don't know if Vray 3 has this feature. I think it does because it's a really popular feature in Vray 2. So override materials and the color being white, which just basically overrides everything in here to be white rather than its standard, which should already be white, but you never know. I've got my shadows turned on and my lights turned on, and then I've got reflection, refraction turned off because nothing is reflecting or refracting other than potentially your skylight, and that could get confusing if, I know some of you have noticed where you'll have a surface that's pointing upwards and then like a wash along a face that's touching that surface. That is probably some form of refraction, and we want to limit that to accentuate the hard lines and contours between your shape. So turn reflection and refraction off to any extent that you could find. System is fine. Camera is normal. Okay, in environment, I have my skylight turned down to half. It's also set to white, and I've turned off my background, mostly because I have a surface underneath my model, so I don't need a background. In the elevation, you might need the background, so you should toggle that and play with it as you see fit. Now, I have this thing called VFB channels, and you guys have the same thing, but it's not called VFB channels anymore, and I'll walk you through what a couple of these things are, but they should help you later down the line. For the time being, you should turn on RGB color, which is your regular. Turn on shadow, which is going to help us capture that shadow. I have on lighting. I don't think it's going to give us much, but I have it on render ID, and sometimes if you want, you can do Z depth, but I don't think it's necessary. But so I have those four turned on. I have RGB color, shadow, lighting, and render ID. And you'll have to search these in your channel. Right now, I'm outputting at 1000 by 800 at 300 pixel ratio. So this is a rather small rendering. I'm doing this to showcase how quickly how to change these settings. So render at a much bigger output for your final. Under indirect illumination, which I have turned on, I've turned off reflective and refractive, and I've turned off ambient occlusion. And I'll illustrate what all of these do in real time. Let's see. I don't think I have anything else changed, so I'm just going to leave my environment open and my indirect illumination open. And I'll render from here. I'm in the same view. Again, I have a light on that's shining about in this direction, and I have it at intensity 0.55. And it's the only thing other than a mild skylight that's producing any light. When I turn that skylight off, re-render, you'll notice I get a much darker rendering, which can be appropriate. And you'll see I even get some reflection and refraction happening here, and I'm not sure where that's coming from or why, but it gets washed out when I turn the skylight back on, so that's not a big deal. I would render with reflection and refraction on. Actually, I will. I don't think you'll see much of a change. If anything, it'll just kind of wash it out and make it a little lighter. It looks like nothing really changed, and that might be because I have it turned off in my additional settings over here. Maybe if I turn that on and re-render. Yeah, it doesn't look like anything is changing much, though. We may be getting more of a wash from our vertical surfaces. Either way, I'm going to turn them off, just for good measure. Right? Okay, now I'm going to turn on ambient occlusion, and what this does is it slows down your render time, but it allows for a more chalk-like rendering. I've described to some of you how this works. What this actually does is it takes a radius from every point of light that's registered on an object, and if another object intersects that radius, depending on how far away from that point it is, it assigns a darkness to that. So you'll see in corners and crevices, they get a little darker. And that gives it a little bit more of a volumetric look, a little bit of a softer look. But I'm going to turn that off for the time being and re-render. So this is about where I want to have it. I can export this, so I'm going to save all, but first I wanted to show you lighting, which gives us a pretty basic where some of the shadows are headed. You can use this with your filters in Photoshop, and that could get you, potentially if you ran like a screen filter on this, it would make for a pretty interesting lighting condition, or like an opposite, or whatever some of those filters are. Render ID we've talked about. It render IDs every object to a different color. I actually have a circle on here that we'll talk about in a second, and then shadow, and you'll see shadow on the ground here, and all of the shade that's happening on here is fairly prominent. And what you can do is you can import this into Photoshop, invert it, and then multiply, and that will get you a really nice shadow without having to trace anything. So I'm going to save all of these. I'm going to put them, I'm actually going to start a new folder, raw render, and call this block. And it should add a subtext to each of these different VFB channels so that you see each one independently. It should render as a, in my case, a JPEG. In your case, it might render as a PNG. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about what this circle is doing here. I've had some people toss around ideas about how to show in an ISO view a setting or a ground condition without going all the way to the edge of your page, or without construing a horizon line. I think this is an effective way to do this. So let's go into top view. I'll just start over with that. What I'm going to do is draw a circle. I've already got a layer titled floor. Type in circle, and from about the middle of my object, which should actually probably be more like here. That looks about right. I'm going to draw a circle at, let's say, 8 inches radius. Right now, this is just a circle, and that's all you're going to see. It has no surface properties. It won't take a shadow. It won't reflect anything. But if you wanted to turn the circle into a surface, you can follow my cursor over here. I'm going to go under my drop-down menu from Surface, and there is this command, Surface from Planar Curves, which is actually Planar Surf in your command line. And it takes any curve that is planar, which means to say that it has no curve applied in the z direction, it's flat, will create a surface within that curve. So you could have really complex curves that that you can apply a surface to. And so what this is doing is it's allowing me to render an environment with only the shadow affecting this area, and when I export the line work on here will give me this little radius around the shape, which you can populate with scale figures and trees, and this way, you know, when it fits on the page, maybe your page is only extended to the boundaries around here and everything is self-contained around the object. And I think this is a really effective way to go about throwing in some of your environments without going all the way to your page borders. So I will stop this video here and continue to the next video just to limit these videos to a short time, mostly because YouTube won't let me post a video that's too long. So we'll pick it up after this in terms of importing this into Photoshop and what kind of little tricks we can do there. Okay, bye.